This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self.
Hey everybody, it is Rosie. I really love this thoughtful conversation. I just feel like it was full of such sage wisdom from the incredible John Hagel. If you're not familiar with him, you need to be. He is a renowned author, strategist, and thought leader that is focused on the future of work and learning and leadership. He is the co-founder of the Deloitte Center for the Edge and has spent decades studying how individuals and organizations can thrive amid accelerating change. Like, speaking my love language. He's got many books out, bestseller. There's so many accolades. I could go on, but his latest book is called The Journey Beyond Fear. And we dig into that. And he also has the Center for Growth, which he talks about in there. And we dig into what fear is and is not, how it stops us individually and collectively as an organization. And it's really about how we're viewing it. Talk about really what learning is and learning isn't, and how we create environments of learning to be the antidote to fear. Talk about why we want to rethink this age-old practice of trying to create a quote-unquote burning platform to help people navigate through change, and why that doesn't really work so well. He talks about one practice for really being future ready and moving into the future and change. He calls scaling the edge. You're going to want to listen for that. He talks about how in an organization, our immune system and antibodies get in our way of being able to effectively move through change. Again, speaking my love language, we talk about a process we use with teams as well. He talks about how we approach strategy differently. There are just so many good nuggets in here. And he talks about really moving from fear instead to embracing the passion of the explorer. This is one you're going to want to take many notes on. You're going to want to check out the show page for all of the goodness. And I will just say, if you want support with your organization, with yourself, with your teams to lead with courage, future ready, and move beyond fear, this is what we do at Salveo Partners. And I would love to hear from you and see how we could support you. Take a listen to this awesome conversation. John, I am so excited to have you here because you're amazing. I love your work. I love your latest book, which we're going to dig into. And I just know that this is going to be another what I call geek out sessions on this show. Thank you for being here and having this important conversation today.
No, I appreciate the opportunity and interest. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So we're going to dive into all things fear. And before anyone listening runs away or cringes, it is a normal human emotion. I will say that there is a lot of fear present in our world today. And, fear can be a catalyst for productive growth, and it can also be a catalyst for not so productive things. So we're just going to dive in. So you talk about that fear is really one of the most powerful and normalized forces in organizations. What kind of fear are we talking about here when you say that?
Well, specifically, the focus of my work has been on fear of the future. When you look into the future, do you see it mainly as a threat or as an opportunity? And in my experience, more and more people around the world are seeing the future as very threatening, very scary. I don't want to go there, and I want to hold on to what I have. And so it's resistance to any change and just holding on to what you have and becoming very isolated.
I would just say I concur that with so many of the leaders that we work with, we actually uncover this mindset that they don't realize they're holding, that is, I can't handle uncertainty. And I think that's where fear comes in. So when you talk about the fear of uncertainty, I wonder if it goes a step deeper of, it's not even just the fear of it. Their fear is that I can't handle it, and therefore it makes it really scary. I don't know if you've experienced that, but that's what it brings up for me when you say that, is what I've seen with some of our leader clients, that you've gotten through uncertain stuff before, but you've got this paralyzing mindset that piggybacks with the fear that just keeps them profoundly stuck.
Yeah, no, I see many forces at work that are shaping this fear. Again, in my view, is it's an understandable emotion, but part of it has to do with just the intensifying competition on a global scale, that we're competing not just as companies, but as individuals with people around the world. And the pace of change accelerating at a rate we never would have expected, and things we thought we could count on are no longer there. And then because of all the connectivity we've created in the world, a small event in a faraway place in the world quickly cascades into an extreme disruptive event. that's a lot of pressure. And again, I think it's understandable why fear is a natural reaction of, I can't handle this. I can't continue in the way I have, but I've got to try, because that's the only thing I can do, is do what I've done in the past and hope that it will lead to more success.
Yeah, that saying that what got you here won't get you there definitely comes to mind. But we are, as human beings, we found from our work and research, and this is not unique to us, but we've just validated it further. We are hardwired for familiarity and comfort. And so the more disruptive the world gets around us, because even if a far off place, it impacts us because it spreads so quickly, the more uncertainty that we face, the more it actually activates those biological self-protective instincts that we have, which is why we cling tightly to what is familiar and what is comfortable. And it shows up getting labeled as resistance to change. It shows up as fear. It shows up as all of these other things. When we recognize it's a product of our wiring, then how do we kind of upgrade the wiring, so to speak? It can be really profound. So let's talk about this. Like, we're going to get into the nitty gritty, but where do you see from your work? Because a lot of times I think we think, oh, there isn't fear in these organizations that are successful and high performing, and it's only for, ones that are struggling. But where do you see fear hiding in organizations, in particular high performing cultures? What should we be looking out for to know that there might be a fear problem present?
First of all, it is hiding, because, one of the pushbacks I get is, well, I haven't seen many people express fear, so there must not be that much fear. And my response is, well, we live in cultures where expressing fear is a sign of weakness. You're a weakling if you're afraid. And I think we find other emotions to express in those kinds of cultures, and one of them is anger. Anger is a good, strong emotion. But I find if you probe underneath the anger, it's often driven by fear, but it's a good, strong emotion. And I think particularly for leaders, the notion of being viewed as weak or, unable to deal with things is very objectionable, and I can't do that. So I have to be strong. I have to give speeches where I know everything, and I have all the answers to all the questions, and will, continue to succeed. So I think it's partly just an indicator is the openness to change. Are we willing to and able to change in a fundamental way, not just on the margin, but just ask the most basic questions about what business should we be in, and how do we construct that very different kind of business?
I love that you brought that up, because there are very real cultural aspects where it is more acceptable to be, in this example, angry than it is to be afraid. Or anger a lot of times masks other emotions too, like I'm hurt or I'm lonely, etc. But you're right, it's more acceptable of, let's get angry. But then if we're not properly naming our emotion, we don't process it in an effective way, and we don't move through it. And organizationally, that can definitely be kind of a cancer that can spread, because you're not addressing that. I call it the head trash that comes with fear. So you talked about being curious and stuff. So talk about why, because I'm all about learning organization, and we have to move to curiosity, and we cannot stand in a place of curiosity when we're in fear and judgment. From your perspective, why is learning so threatening to these fear-based systems that are out there?
Again, I need to make a distinction here, because most people, when they talk about learning, most leaders of organizations, when we talk about learning, are talking about training programs. And they all do learning. They all have training programs. So we're doing learning. Yes, wonderful. The challenge is, in a rapidly changing world, the most valuable form of learning and necessary form is learning in the form of creating entirely new knowledge. It's not going to a training room and listening to somebody share existing knowledge. It's coming up with fundamentally new approaches, new ideas about how to deal with a rapidly changing world. That doesn't occur in a training room. That occurs in the workplace. And it requires a fundamentally different culture in the workplace in order to pursue that kind of learning. So I think that's the challenge, is how do we build cultures and organizations that support, and not just support, but insist on this kind of learning from everyone in the organization. not just in the research labs or in the innovation centers, but every department. How do we help them to learn faster how to deal with situations they've never encountered before?
I love that you made that distinction because you're right. We talk about the difference between, development and even training, that they each have their place. But I love that distinction because in this fast paced world, you're right. We are coming upon adaptive challenges that we've never experienced before. And the only way we know from all of the research is that the only way we effectively move through adaptive challenges is we have to have new learning. We have to have new thinking. We can't default to how we've done stuff before. We have to get deeply uncomfortable and fundamentally let go of what is familiar, which is really, really, really unsettling. From your experience, then, how do we start to go about creating these spaces where we can recognize that there is fear and we can not get sucked into it, so to speak, and instead really create these environments where we can get uncomfortable, where we can learn and really think about things differently?
Well, it's not easy. I don't want to suggest there's a silver bullet or, simple way of doing this. It does require fundamental change. And I've become a strong proponent of a different approach to strategy that I call zoom out, zoom in, that I found by working with some of the most successful technology companies here in Silicon Valley. And the approach that they have of zoom out, zoom in is focus on two time horizons. One is 10 to 20 years, long-term future, and identify a really inspiring, exciting opportunity that we could be pursuing, addressing in that 10 to 20-year period. And then the other time horizon is zoom in is 6 to 12 months. And the question are, what are the 2 or 3 initiatives, no more, 2 or 3 that we could pursue in the next 6 to 12 months that would have the greatest impact in accelerating our movement towards that longer term opportunity? And I found this is a powerful approach to strategy for many reasons, but one reason is emotions. I mean, if you can come up with a really inspiring, exciting view of the future, now you start to fight that fear of the future, which is all about how terrible the future is going to be. No, there's a huge opportunity out there that we could pursue. But again, people who are driven by fear would tend to be very skeptical and say, well, that's just a fantasy. That future is never going to happen. That opportunity is never going to happen. But if you, in the next 6 to 12 months, can show tangible progress, action, and impact that moves you towards that opportunity, now suddenly people start to get really intrigued. Wow, you were able to do that in 6 months? How can I join? And so I think it's that notion and recognizing that, while we have a sense of the opportunity, there's a lot to learn about the opportunity and about, more importantly, about the steps that we need to take to get to that opportunity. And so it really builds that excitement about learning to say, we need to do this to really address this opportunity.
I love that zoom in, zoom out approach for sure. And, as I'm listening to you, I think about just physiologically what that approach is doing is it's tapping into the limbic part of our brain, right? Where we have the emotions, and that's actually where we make decisions, but it's not rational. We don't have language for it. And so, Simon Sinek talks about having a just cause, right? That we're moving towards something, building on the why that he talks about, but really, do we have this just cause that we all believe, like, here, it's way out there, but we're always inching our way towards it. And it's really that compass or that lighthouse or that North Star, if you will, where you're tapping into the emotions in people. And like you said, tapping into emotions that are powerful enough that they can lift temporarily beyond the fear. Like, okay, if the fear wasn't present, oh, what's possible? Let's get into action. And so I love that approach. So with taking that approach, and let's talk to the individual. So people who are listening that are formal leaders, informal leaders, running organizations, running their own businesses, what are some of the things that leaders inadvertently get wrong about fear? Like, when they're trying to do the right thing, they think that they're creating a learning environment. They think that they're being effective about strategy, but where do they go astray and inadvertently get in their own way?
Oh, wow. That's a long conversation. There's a lot of things that can lead people astray. I think one of the big issues that I've encountered is that when leaders see the need for change, they believe that the best way to motivate people is to focus on what I call the burning platform message. If we don't change, we're all going to die. The platform's going to crash around us. Get moving, change. What does that do? It feeds the fear. Oh my God, we're on a burning platform? No, we have to just hold the heart, squeeze harder, and hope for the best. And so, again, it's this notion of feeding the fear versus trying to overcome the fear and find ways to move people beyond the fear.
I love that you brought up the burning platform approach, because this is where we evolve. Once upon a time earlier in my career, we would talk about creating a burning platform, but not trying to be fear, trying to use that metaphor from an inspiration standpoint. Like, I know this is possible. We want you to be a part of the change. How do you communicate that? But you're right. I think sometimes there's a mismatch between intention and impact, where perhaps a leader has an intention of, they think they're creating a quote unquote burning platform to really help people. It's really about creating that sense of urgency and alignment around change. But instead, it turns into this sense of urgency from a scarcity mindset. And we have to do this because, and then it does inadvertently bring people into fear. And so I think that there's a way to help people hold a vision and get excited about something and go, here's an opportunity. And we don't want to miss this opportunity, and do it in the, more forward thinking, positive, coming from a place of abundance, if you will, versus inadvertently coming from this place of scarcity, trying to avoid bad consequences, which then invokes that fear-based response. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, again, it's complicated. I do believe that identifying this inspiring, exciting opportunity out in the future is absolutely essential. I think also being articulate about what are the barriers and obstacles that are preventing us from achieving that opportunity, so that it becomes a call to action. Because I think one of the things that I challenge a bit is this sense of just build optimism. Well, I've come to believe that if you're a pure optimist, you become very passive. Everything's going to be wonderful. Huge opportunities in the future. Let's go out and have a beer and celebrate. But no, you have to focus on what are the challenges and obstacles, the barriers that are preventing us from getting to that opportunity, and how can we overcome them? So it motivates people to act, not just to see the opportunity, but to act, to address the opportunity.
Yeah, it reminds me of, like, two things can be true at the same time. Like, we can be excited about this, and we need to address the very real constraints that are before us, because otherwise it turns into toxic positivity or tragic optimism or whatever term you want to throw at it. Or, what is the phrase that hope is not a business strategy? Like, that you need to do both. So talk to me then about, for the leaders that are listening, again, whether they're formal or informal, what are some of the steps that you have found most effective that leaders can take that can start to reduce their own fear without kind of destabilizing the organization and without causing unnecessary, unintended impacts around them?
Well, again, it's complicated. A lot of different things, depends on the particular psychology and cultures of the organization. But one of the things that I've become a strong proponent of is a different approach to change. When a leader sees the need for change, they often adopt what I call the top-down Big Bang approach to change. We have to change everything. And we're a large organization, it's going to take a lot of money. For a large organization, it's going to take a long time, but we're going to do this. We have to change. Well, again, my experience is when people hear this within the organization, their response is, wait a minute, it's going to take a lot of money? I don't have money to spare. I've got a very scarce budget. I can barely support what I need to. It's going to take a long time. I need to meet my quarterly performance targets, and I'll be fired if I don't. So don't distract me with these long-term opportunity things. So the top-down Big Bang approach to strategy, and there are a lot of research studies that have been done that show they have an extremely high failure rate, and it's because of what I call the immune system and the antibodies that are drawn out within the organization if they see that message. And so, again, a different approach to change that I think has much more promise and can help leaders build some confidence is what I call scaling the edge, which is look around in the existing organization and see where there's an edge, a smaller unit, smaller revenue, smaller resources. But that if you look ahead into the future, zoom out into the future, you can see that that edge could actually become the new core of your business. It's going to help you to address this huge opportunity that's in the future. And then focus on scaling that edge. And so you're not telling everybody in the organization they have to change tomorrow, and you're demonstrating, hopefully, progress in scaling the edge so that other people in other parts of the organization can see, my God, the edge is really expanding at a dramatic rate. How can we participate? This is exciting. So it's a different approach to change, but I think really can be helpful to leaders in terms of overcoming the immune system and the antibodies that resist change.
Yeah. So can you elaborate more on the immune system and antibodies, what you mean by that and what that looks like?
Well, again, I think it's ultimately the emotion of fear that's driving a lot of people in the organization to resist change. And it's not that they're evil people with bad intentions. They're very well-intentioned people. They want success and everything to be good for the organization, but they're driven by the fear that says the best way to move forward is just hold on to what we have and squeeze harder and move forward. So I think that's the source of the immune system and antibodies that really just want to hold on and not change.
Yeah, right. I mean, our immune system and antibodies are protecting us. So collectively as an organization, and I love that you bring this up because are you familiar with the immunity to change work from Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy out of Harvard?
Yeah.
So we use that on an individual level, but also on a team level. So the essence behind it for people who are listening is that you identify some kind of improvement goal. So we want to change fill in the blank, right? We want to change our operating, we want to change whatever it is. And then you look at all of the ways you are inadvertently working against yourself, even though you're highly motivated for this. And then comes what you're talking about, the antibodies or the immune system is then you start to look at what is the fear, the irrational fears that you're worried about. Whatever, we'll be irrelevant, we'll screw this up, we won't be perfect, whatever it might be. And then those three components make up what they call your immune system, where you are inadvertently working against yourself. The harder that you try to push on the goal, that's like one foot on the gas. Those fears are like one foot on the brake that say, no, 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 danger, danger. My job is to protect you. And so we're going to kind of keep doing what we've always done, which then looks and gets labeled as being a pain in the butt, as being resistant to change, as being irrelevant, whatever it might be. And the key to unlocking that is to really get curious about what is the underlying kind of unconscious mindset that we are holding on to that is driving all of this. And so as you were talking, I would love your thoughts about this. So we do it on an individual level, but you also can do it on a team-based level. So we had an organization that we did this mapping exercise with their leadership team because they were looking at wanting to have greater accountability. So one of the things that kept happening is lack of accountability, lack of consistent accountability throughout the organization. It showed up in culture surveys in various aspects. And so we wanted to look at, okay, so if you want to have a more highly accountable organization, how are you working against yourself? Well, we're not consistent with performance expectations enforcement. We're keeping people too long. We're saving people from struggle, blah, 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 blah. But when we got to that underlying fear, for them, it was really about upsetting this label that they had for themselves or belief they had about themselves of being a people-focused workplace and about like having their people feel like they don't care about them and that if they had accountability, then they couldn't be caring at the same time. And so when we mapped it out and they saw it, they were like, holy cannoli. So then we started talking about, well, how do you then shift this mindset? Because if you have these underlying fears in your leadership team that you can only be seen as caring and a people-forward organization and a great place to work if there's that false harmony and people are happy, but you're inadvertently frustrating everybody and you're shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to performance because you're refusing to have accountability because you don't see accountability as kind. They just kept perpetuating their same issues over and over and over. So that was like their collective immune system. Anyway, I share that because as you were saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like we have a very real example of that in action. So if you were sitting there with that group and they realize they have this fear-based immune system and antibodies, how would you guide them to start to move beyond that once they realize they have those immune system and antibodies that are quietly working against them?
Again, it's complicated. It depends on the very many different environments and psychologies that are involved. But it's first of all focusing on the emotions of the people. And really, one of the issues that I hear about is let's focus on the mindset of the employees. And when I probe on that, their clarification is, well, we just need to figure out what their view of the future is, what their beliefs are, what data they're using to analyze all this. That's the mindset. I believe we need to focus on what I call heart set, which is about the emotions. Again, it's not about what you're thinking, it's about what you're feeling. And if you don't focus on that, you're never going to understand how these mindsets emerged in the first place. And so it's really getting into that the emotions, and it's, again, a lot of challenges, but part of it is helping people to feel comfortable expressing their emotions. I mean, again, we live in cultures where emotions are a distraction. We just focus on the job that is assigned. And so it's creating an environment where people can express fear if they're feeling the fear. And it starts maybe with the leader of the team or whoever is influencing the team the most, but expressing their own fear and being able to draw out the fear of the others, and then starting them to move to what would help them to overcome the fear. What are the actions they could take that would start to give them more confidence? And again, it's not huge actions that are going to take decades. It's what can they do in the next few months that will start to really show progress and ability to overcome the barriers that are there.
Well, I appreciate that distinction because you're right. I mean, I think it's mindset and heart set. I love that way of framing it. And leaders set the tone for whether there's a sense of psychological safety on a team, right? If you're a leader and you speak up and say, I'm worried about this, but I also have hope we can get through this. Who else is worried about this? What's the narrative you're telling yourself? Or what I always say, like, what's the head trash that's coming up for you around this change? We as leaders formally can create that space where people feel safe to speak up. We also can shut it down by not creating space for it, by not acknowledging that it's there, the elephant in the room. The list goes on and on. So we talked about the immune system and antibodies briefly, but you also mentioned several times this scaling the edge. So let's bring this very practically. Like, as people are listening, walk me through an example of an organization that has made this shift from kind of fear-based, having this immune system and antibodies, and leveraging some of the things you're talking about, bringing in the heart set, scaling the edge, and has been able to successfully move past fear. Like, walk us through what that journey looked like, kind of where they were and where they are by moving beyond fear or moving through fear.
One that intrigues me, it's actually a company that's not well known here in the U.S., but it's a Chinese company. It's called Li and Feng, and they're over 100 years old. They started back in the early 1900s. And throughout most of their history, they were basically deal makers. They connected apparel designers in the West with a factory in China where they could do some work for the apparel designer, and they wrote the contract, got a commission on the contract, and moved on. And two brothers took over the company. They were a fairly large company, but two brothers took over the company back in the 1970s and saw that the commissions on the deals were shrinking. And they said, uh-oh, this is not a good future for us. We need to come up with a different model or a different business opportunity. And they, without knowing about it, they instinctively did a zoom out for the apparel industry globally and saw that it was going to become more and more complex, more and more rapidly evolving. And they saw the unmet need of the apparel designers was to have what they ended up calling a trusted advisor, somebody who could work with them and help them connect to a growing range of resources around the world to help them in a rapidly changing world. So they saw the opportunity, the unmet need, and what they did was they created a business unit. It had 5 people in it, and it was the Calvin Klein business unit. Their assignment was to go live with the Calvin Klein organization, get to know them more and more deeply, and become more helpful to them. And it turned out this business unit scaled at a dramatic rate. There was a huge unmet need in Calvin Klein, and they created other business units for other apparel designers. But many of the traditional executives in the company who were deal makers just couldn't understand why we were spending so much time getting to know the customer. Let's just do the contract, get the commission, and move on. And those ended up getting fired over time. But these business units became the new core of Li and Fung and dramatically grew the business and a lot of profitability. And part of the model, which I think is, again, going to be challenging for more and more companies, is the success of Li and Fung was by connecting into a broader and broader ecosystem of partners. They had over 15,000 business partners around the world. And their ability to connect their customer with whatever partner made the most sense at the time was a great value to the customer. And Li and Fung didn't have to create all this capability themselves. They just connected to the partners that had the capability. And so it was a very interesting new model. And again, because they scaled the edge, they didn't try to go in and change everything in the core. They started building out these new business units, and that became the new core.
I love that example. Thank you for sharing their story. I was not familiar with them. And what's interesting and what's coming up for me as I listening to their example is I think, we all know that AI is just rapidly evolving and changing and completely changing the business landscape. But one of the things the research continues to emphasize and reinforce is that in a world of AI, human relationships and human skills have actually never become more important. And how often do you have people say, they call someplace and it's a press 1 for here, and people are like, can I just talk to a person? Or, I think the need for human interactions and human reciprocal relationships is even more critical and is going to continue to be. So like with their model, it's going from this transaction of get the deal done to let's build relationships and be that trusted advisor where like, hey, I can't help you, but I can refer you to this person. And I even think about our business, we're big on having mutual referral relationships because someone might come to us for something that isn't quite in our niche, but they trust us. And I'm like, but I know someone who can help you, and vice versa. And I'm a big person where I very rarely respond to those cold outreaches. Like if I don't have a relationship with you, because you don't even know if you're talking to a bot or a real person. So there's something about this, like, I want to know there's a real person behind this and that someone's going to substantiate you. So although, they've been around a while, I think it's very relevant for what's happening now because human relationship and having that trust with that person that you can go to and having who can vouch for you. And I mean, I think in general, whatever someone's business is, people want less of that transaction and they want to feel part of a purpose. They want to feel part of it. They want to know there's a human being. They want to feel part of something because so much of the world is filtered and fake.
It's very compatible with some of my perspective. I've given talks on how technology can restore our humanity. If you look at, I'm going to generalize, but if you look at work throughout most large organizations, it's tightly specified, highly standardized tasks that need to be done very efficiently and reliably. And to me, that's work that humans should never have been asked to do. We get distracted, we get tired. Let machines do that work. But I think one of the challenges, again, I've seen a lot of challenges in the business world. When I talk to executives about automation and AI, they have 2 questions. How quickly can I automate? And how many jobs can I eliminate? So if I'm getting the machines to do all this routine work that humans were doing before, I can now fire all those people. And my belief is the missed opportunity is now freeing up the time of these people so they can focus on addressing unseen situations and opportunities to deliver more and more value to the environment they're in. And that's the missed opportunity, but that requires You talked about human skills. I talk about human capabilities. To me, skills are valuable in a specific context. So how to operate this machine, how to do this kind of calculation and this process. They're valuable in that specific context, but otherwise, who cares? And on the other side, if you're talking about capabilities, which I include curiosity, imagination, creativity, collaboration, reflection, all of those capabilities are valuable in all contexts, especially if we're focused on how to create more value to these stakeholders that we're addressing. And so I believe this is an opportunity now to free up people's time so they can cultivate these capabilities and deliver more and more value to the stakeholders.
Well, yeah, and especially because if you go back to earlier in our conversation, talking about, learning and really knowledge that hasn't created, if we just take AI as an example, it's existing thinking and outputs and programming. So if we need new thinking and need to approach something different, the models that go in to machine learning are already outdated. If we look at it from that perspective, if we're trying to truly look out and zoom out and solve for something that we've never addressed before, we need new thinking, not based on old inputs, right, into the model. So I think that is spot on, and I think we're using. I see where you're seeing skills capabilities. When I say the human skills, it is the curiosity, learning, and only a human can help connect you to purpose and foster that sense of mattering and belonging and being seen and being invested in. And I think, yeah, these organizations that have I'm going to call it a dehumanized mindset of, ooh, let me get all these, technological digital transformation in so that I can get rid of people, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, right, in the short term, because you're going to be stuck with old thinking, and, a lot of business is still done through relationships and whatnot. So I appreciate that distinction. So if people who are listening and who are going to share this episode, if they were going to remember kind of one thing about fear, what do you want them to remember or keep in mind about fear?
Well, less about fear, but I think what we haven't talked about is what's the alternative other than fear? What's the emotion that can help us to achieve much more of our impact? And I've done a lot of research on environments where there's sustained extreme performance improvement. And what I found is, despite a very diverse set of environments, all the participants in those environments had a specific emotion that I called the passion of the explorer. And I emphasize of the explorer because everybody talks about passion, but we all have different definitions of what that is. In the passion of the explorer, the people who have this passion are excited about having more and more impact in a specific domain. It could be anything from gardening to nuclear physics, but they're really excited about not just being in the domain, but having more and more impact in that domain. When they get confronted with unexpected challenges in that domain, their first reaction is, who else can I connect with who can help me get to a better answer faster? No matter how smart or talented they are, they know they're going to get to better answers faster together. And so they're extremely well connected. They're constantly asking for help and building trust because they're expressing vulnerability. And so I think this passion of the explorer is something that we all as humans have within us, but very few of us have really made the effort to find it or cultivate it. And I do get the pushback again to just express the objections I get. The pushback is, well, come on, John, some of us are capable of passion, but most of us just want to be told what to do and have the security of an income. And my response to that is, okay, let's go to a playground and let's look at children 5 or 6 years old. Show me one that doesn't have real excitement about exploring new things and coming together with others to explore them. We all had it as children. What happened? We went to school and we were taught to listen to the teacher, memorize what the teacher has to say, and show that you've memorized it on the exams. And if you got passion, forget about it or leave it at home or, So I believe, again, we all have it within us, but we've been in cultures where passion is actually deeply suspect. First of all, again, I'm sorry to go on, but one of the things that I ask is, what large company do you know that tries to measure the passion of the people in their workforce? There's virtually no one, in my knowledge, that has that focus on passion. And again, it's because passion is suspect. Passionate people ask too many questions. They take too many risks. They deviate from the script. Why would you want a passionate worker? And what leaders focus on, and again, I'm generalizing, but is engagement, worker engagement. We want engaged workers. And what do they mean by that? They mean, do they like their work? Do they like the people they work with? Do they respect the company they work for? That's an engaged worker. Okay, let's take one of those engaged workers and tell them that their work is going to have to fundamentally change. What? Change? No, I like the work I'm doing. I like the people I'm working with. I'm not going to change. Engaged workers are actually pretty resistant to change. Passionate of the explorer, those workers are excited about the potential for change. They can have more and more impact. This is great. Let's go for it. I'm a strong believer that not just recognizing the obstacle of fear, but recognizing the untapped potential of the passion of the explorer. And how can we draw that out in people, in all the people in the organization?
No, I love that you went there and saved me from asking a follow-up question. So it was like you read my mind. But, the organization that comes to mind immediately as you say that is probably Patagonia. Passionate about the environment and everything they do, and they have extremely loyal followers and just that believe in their cause and all of those things. But I love this distinction about the engagement versus passion. And so often passion gets weaponized as, someone being too bold or too loud or too ambitious, or that it's a bad thing, or they need to channel their passion constructively type of thing. And there can be passion that doesn't come across in a right way, but I don't know if it's really passion. I think sometimes it gets mislabeled. But as I listened to everything you shared, which I'm so glad that you elaborated on that, it's really goes back to that zoom out and zoom in that you said. It's, do we have something to zoom people out that they can be passionate about? Call it a purpose, call it just cause, whatever it is, but it's something that people are all moving towards together. There's a sharedness relation, like we're all moving towards this together, and I see how I fit into that, and that gives me energy, and that gives me excitement, and that my what might have to change how I'm going about my work, but I'm okay with that. Bring it on, right? Let's explore how else. I mean, you saw so much of that happen during COVID as an example of organizations that were really clear about their purpose and shifted gears of whatever their product was to be a part of the solution of, preserving health and everything in the pandemic is one example. And organizations that were so focused on the way they've always done things struggled, and many of them, ceased to exist type of thing. I mean, that's just one small microcosm, but I think we try to zoom out 10 years and we can only imagine what the digital world is going to be and what AI is going to be and all of these things. But that mindset and that heart set of having that passion and being able to say, how can we do things differently and not rest on our laurels and just get really complacent, I think is going to separate in this competitive landscape and marketplace those that thrive and those that are on the struggle bus, so to speak.
Absolutely. No, I'm a strong believer that to succeed in the future, we have to find and pursue our passion of the explorer.
I love that. So with all the work that you've done and continue to do, what is giving you hope right now for the future of leadership and work?
Well, it's interesting because I've done a lot of work on the long-term trends that are reshaping the global economy and society. And on the one side, as I mentioned, the global trends are intensifying competition, accelerating change, creating disruptive events, a lot of mounting performance pressure that is feeding the fear. Interesting, I love paradox because in this context, at the same time, those same forces are creating exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create far more value with far less resource, far more quickly than would have been imaginable a few decades ago. And I think what gives me hope and optimism is the notion that there are those exponentially expanding opportunities, and that we just need to make the effort to see them and be motivated to pursue them. And that requires overcoming fear and building that passion of the explorer.
I love that. I love the passion of the explorer. So, speaking of, I don't know, passion of the explorer is one of the things that I am incredibly, I don't know if obsessed is the right word, but in the work that we do, I really want to normalize the messiness of being human because we do all have these fears. And no matter how much work we've done on ourselves, no matter how enlightened we might be, we're a human being that gets in our own way. And so I love to ask all of my guests this question. And I think I forewarned you about this, but speaking of fear, it's a great tie in. John, what is a self limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And when it shows up, how do you move beyond it so that you can still show up as a leader in your life and really, have the passion of the explorer?
I think one that's certainly been a challenge throughout my life is stage fright. When I have to get up to give a talk or speak to a leadership group, I'm afraid. I get a lot of fear. Underneath it all is something that most people call the imposter syndrome, which is the belief that you're finally going to be exposed, that you're nowhere near as smart as you claim to be or as capable as you are. And it's a potentially very self-limiting story, but fortunately, again, because I've cultivated this passion of the explorer, I immediately shift to what's the opportunity that I'm addressing and be excited about that, even though there's fear and risk and all the rest. Focus on the opportunity.
I love that. Well, and for anyone that takes a stage, whether it's in a little conference room or a huge venue, I would say most people that are in the audience are rooting for you. They're not really judging you. They're rooting for you, and they're like they want to connect with you. So I love that. I love that. Are you ready for quick questions?
Sure.
All right. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is.
I mean, living authentically to me is being deeply in touch with your emotions. What are your emotions and understanding them, why you have them, and how they're helping or hurting you in terms of achieving what you want.
Love it. Love it. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do?
It's potentially finding other people in the organization or the group or whatever that have the potential to be leaders and giving them the opportunity to demonstrate leadership.
Nice. What is something that people would be surprised to know about you?
I guess my focus on emotions, people always ask me, well, so you got a degree in psychology or you're a psychologist? And no, I've never studied psychology as in a school, but over the years, I've come to believe that emotions are much more fundamental drivers of change and impact than anything else. If we don't understand the emotions and shape those emotions, we're never going to achieve what we want to achieve. And so it's become a real passion of mine to focus on how do we draw up the most productive emotions.
Well, they're human skills, human-centric skills, human capabilities. I love it. All right. What is your favorite go-to movie?
Oh, boy. Favorite go-to movie would be quite a while ago. It was a movie called American Graffiti.
Oh, that's a good one. All right. What is something you can't live without?
Chocolate.
What kind of chocolate? Dark, milk, white?
Very dark chocolate, low sugar, pure chocolate, as pure as possible. I'm a chocoholic, and no day is complete without some of that chocolate.
I love it. Well, dark chocolate's good for your heart and many things. So there we go. I love that. So besides dark chocolate, what is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Being able to help people around me, it could be family, friends, people in the business world that see that they've been able to do things that as a result of things that I've said or showed or helped them with that really made a difference to them.
I love that. Well, I will tell you, there's so many things I'm going to be taking away from today, but I'm definitely taking away the passion of the explorer. Like I jotted that down and I love that so much. So it might be a future Rosie in my pocket. I'm just saying. Okay. What are you grateful for right now?
I'm just grateful for the opportunity to continue to pursue my passion. We haven't really mentioned, but I'm in the process, having written the book, The Journey Beyond Fear, I'm now in the process of creating a center that I call the Center for Growth, that will offer programs to help people on that journey beyond fear. So I'm getting really good feedback from people. More and more people, I think, are seeing how limiting fear is and wanting and needing help to move beyond it.
I love that Center for Growth. That's amazing. I love that you're doing that. And you can't see it, folks, but there's just such a good smile on your face when you talk about it. It's like, oh, I love it. I love it. So, one last question. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone, I would say, to move beyond fear and show up as a leader, what would that be?
One of the things I talk about a lot is the shift in leadership models, where today the mark of a strong leader is someone who has an answer to all the questions. No matter what question you have, you can count on the leader to have an answer. And by the way, if they don't have an answer, maybe it's time to get rid of them. My belief, one of the most powerful ways to help drive change is for leaders to ask really powerful and inspiring questions, and to freely acknowledge they don't have an answer and ask for help, because it sends two key messages to the people in the organization. First of all, not only are questions okay, they're absolutely essential in a rapidly changing world. And it's not only okay to ask for help, it's absolutely necessary to ask for help, because again, no matter how smart or talented you are, you're going to get to a lot better answers faster if you have help from others. And so it creates that culture of question asking and seeking help.
I love that. It's that proverb that's what, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far or go further, you got to go together type of a thing.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you for your sage and your wisdom, and thank you for the work you're doing. And I just think that everything you're doing is amazing. And I think it's so timely, and everyone needs to go out and get your book, The Journey Beyond Fear. And we're going to put links in the show notes, and hope that your center just continues to make such an impact on people and everything that you're doing. So just truly, truly much, much gratitude. Thank you for being here, John.
Well, thank you for all the inspiring questions, for sure.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.